So I had some trouble in the studio today because the sun's out, so I've had to cover the windows because I've not got blackout curtains.
Yeah, but I can still see the Leeds in Crisis T-shirt.
Old Combined Nations, because obviously got new one now. Brand new Midlands Hurricanes shirt, which is beautiful.
Lovely.
Definitely glad I got 3XL and Gateshead Thunder at the back, which doesn't let the light in. But yeah, Leeds are in crisis because they are. The people, they want to know, Phil, because we may as well start. 4020 not live, we're back again. And Leeds are in crisis because they've lost a coach. Very, very careless. We'll talk about Richard Agar as a coach in a bit, but he's gone. Well, he's still there. He's got a job. We don't know what he's doing yet. He might be handing out the programs or something on Saturday, but he's not there anymore. Jamie Jones-Buchanan taking charge of first team affairs for the foreseeable. We've got to talk about who's going to possibly come in, but what do you make of it all, Phil, anyway? The league table, as they say, 6 weeks in, 6 rounds in, are we allowed to say that is a league table now? Because obviously after a week.
Yeah, we're nearer to Easter than the beginning of the season, so I think it's fair. The first thing is, I think there was a lot of optimism in pre-season. So this is unexpected. It isn't when you look at the record of 5 losses out of 6, but the Leeds played Hull in a pre-season friendly, looked very convincing. The game against Warrington, the first match of the season that was on Channel 4, I think even Darryl Powell admitted the better team lost, and the bulk of that game was played with 12 and a bit with 11 men. And I think the feeling was, there's a good group of people here that will achieve something this year. Suddenly, it looks anything other than that. And I guess there's a couple of reasons why perhaps changes come now. One is clearly economic. Leeds are entering a run of 5 home games out of their next 6. And there's already a concern, as there would be from the fans, that they were showing their dissatisfaction with the way the team were playing. I think the last 2 performances are the ones that clearly have led to Richard Agar taking what I still think is an honourable decision to step back, and also a very principled one to have a press conference. Normally, it doesn't work like that, and he absolutely outlined all of the reasons behind his decision, and it was almost a falling on the sword, a selfless act, as it was indeed when he took over from David Furness. So you're right, we can assess whether he leaves the club in a better position or worse, which is what you do when most people leave jobs in a minute. But I think the defeat at home to Hull, the magnitude of it, shocked a lot of people. And Hull quite clearly were down on troops that day, but totally and utterly dominated proceedings. And that, I think, came as a shock because, as more than anything, it was at Headingley. And then the performance against Salford, which for 60 minutes was okay. But in the last 20 minutes, they paid the price yet again of their indiscipline, ran out of bodies and energy in the last 20 minutes and lost to a team that was far more creative than them. And I think when you look at, a significant beating at home followed by, maybe a 5, possibly 6 out of 10 performance away, which didn't really show a lot of signs of, taking that on and responding to it. I think Richard Agar felt it was backed into a corner. But yeah, I think it is a surprise in that 6 games is not long into any season for any coach. And I say, I don't think, because of what Gary Hetherington has said in the aftermath of it, that there's necessarily a succession plan behind it. So if there is going to be criticism of Leeds, which clearly there has been and should be, and our good friend Mr. Davidson has written 1,600 very well-crafted words about what he thinks the issues are there. I think 2 things have happened over the last 3 years that they hadn't planned for, both involving coaches. One was appointing David Furner and it not working. So I think that they felt that being an ex-player and having some pedigree in the ranks of the NRL, that he was the right appointment. And clearly 14 games into his tenure, that all went sour. And I don't think, again, anyone connected with the club could have planned that that's how it would work out. And I think at the start of this season, Richard Agar was seen as, yes, transitioning into another role, which he will now at some point move into when they identify what it is. And another coach was probably coming in, maybe at the end of this season. But for it to be not even the Ides of, well, we're just past the Ides of March, aren't we? Not even April Fool's Day. Yes, I think it's a big news story and a surprise, and it certainly ratchets up Saturday's Challenge Cup game against Castleford, because somebody's season is going to be on the verge of being almost unsalvageable as we hit the 1st of April.
Let's pick the bones out of this. And the first thing after the game on Friday on TV that we're talking about was Luke Gale, which I thought was an interesting angle to take, because if you're a club, you're always going to back your coach over your players, because your coach is supposed to be there forever. The players come and go, but the coach will be there forever. And we've not seen, I know Hull are above Leeds in the table, but we've hardly seen Luke Gale ripping up trees for Hull, because he's hardly played because he kicked Johnny Lomax in the leg. He being replaced by Blake Austin and Aidan Caesar on paper seemed like a good thing. It hasn't worked out so far, but we are only 6 games into the season. Whether they will gel or not remains to be seen. But I think saying, well, here's a player who was there and he's not there anymore, is a very basic way of looking at things. It's the way fans look at things, saying, oh, well, if we just kept him, well, we've kept Ben Jones-Bishop, we'd have scored all those tries that whoever else would have scored on that wing. So it's that kind of fans' math that was on the telly on Friday, which puzzled me. Obviously, the players at the moment aren't working, but Richard Agar doesn't send them out to get penalties every 2 minutes.
I think there's two things with Caesar and Austin. One is it was assumed that they would gel immediately because they'd played together before, and it doesn't look like they have. So I think that is an issue. And again, when they were signed, I think there was some raised eyebrows about Austin, but clearly I didn't hear anybody say Caesar wasn't a good signing. I think we were all talking at the time at how do you fit 3 into 2. So I think that's a hindsight call. If anybody's saying they were the wrong signings, I'm not sure they were per se. And I think the way Caesar played before he was injured at Huddersfield, and the value that he gave to that team would indicate that he's a quality operator, very much in the mould of a Luke Gale type of player, a get you around the field. In their defence, and clearly there are more things that they could be doing within a game that would help the team, not least the kicking game. And I would go back to that defeat at Salford on Friday, stemmed almost from the point of a very poor Aidan Caesar kick that Joe Burgess did magnificently with in the in-goal area and got out and set up the attack that ultimately scored a very important try. I think that was a poor kick choice at that point, which again is down to the guy on the field, not the bloke in the stand. But the other thing I think that's been the bigger issue for Leeds all year, and already people are saying we don't care about Leeds, we just want to see them lose every week, is that those halfbacks have nothing to work off in terms of the forwards in front of them. It's one of the laziest cliches in rugby league that the forwards lay the platform. But I go back to Jake Connor and that game against at Hull that Leeds played. Everybody was saying that he was the man of the match, that all of the things he did determined the outcome. To me, he did what he did on the back of the fantastic work that Chris Satai did. He was so important that night in getting the team going forward with every single carry. I think he took the ball up 19 times and made it, more than 10 metres a carry with every carry, put his team on the front foot, almost monstered the Leeds pack on his own. There was no one, apart from maybe Mikołaj Alecki for part of the time, who could match what he was doing. And if Jake Connor had been playing behind that Leeds pack that night, he wouldn't have been as effective. So I think, yes, there's more expected of Caesar and Austin, but they're not the reason Leeds are at the moment where they are in the table. I think they look unbalanced in the pack and they're indisciplined when they're on the field.
Could almost level that same accusation, and it was levelled at them at Warrington on Saturday. Kevin Brown obviously was massively disrespectful to Warrington in tipping a Wakefield win, and well done on picking up the meatballs there, Kev. You'll do for me. He said their pack looks very light, and it was proven to be. On paper, is Miller and Lino a better or worse halfback partnership than Widdop and Williams? Well, international caps say it is. But on the day, they were given the platform to play with, and the Warrington pair weren't. So there are a lot of factors here at play at Leeds. Obviously, they can't go out and sign a load of forwards because there aren't any, and Warrington would probably beat them to it in terms of paying money for them.
And the other thing about that, which you're absolutely right about, is that in previous days, and why Leeds have partly got the reputation they have of being despised by most other fans, is that, you know, if Jack Myerscough had been in charge and this had been 1972 instead of 2022, he would have gone out and bought the 3 best players in the competition as soon as they'd had a couple of defeats. You can't do that anymore. You know, you can't suddenly say, well, we'll pay whatever for Alex Worms and he's now a Leeds player. It just doesn't work like that. So, no, I think you can question whether they have the depth in the forwards. And it's really interesting. A wider debate other than sort of Leeds is I thought we'd moved away a little bit from sides being forward dominated to be successful. So, you know, you looked at Hull last year and you thought maybe there's an overemphasis on size. You looked at perhaps what Huddersfield were doing and, you know, let's try and dominate up the middle before we even think about playing any rugby on the back of it. But funnily enough, this year, the sides who have gone lighter in the pack, like Leeds and Warrington, are the ones who've suffered. So, yeah, maybe we just need to look at, you know, has the resumption of scrums, maybe, I don't know about the 6 tackle rule. I think, again, there are still issues with that. And one of the things Leeds could not get to grips with at Salford on Friday night, they gave away 10 6-agains, which I think is the most I've seen a team give away since it was introduced. And that normally means you're losing the ruck because you physically aren't big enough. And Salford aren't the biggest of teams, but they clearly had bigger men. Catalans have proved that, you know, start with big men and you can be successful. And I had a feeling we were moving away from that. So clearly we're not.
We're not blaming Jack Smith for all the 6-agains. I had to check who the referee was.
No. I think when a team is so much on the back foot physically, and part of that is down to the fact that they've had a couple of forwards sent to the sin bin, then no, I think they try and slow the ball down or stand a bit offside in the early part of a tackle count. And Jack Smith felt that they'd done it, you know, too many times, 10 times to Salford's 4. And again, if you then translate that into the amount of possession each team has, that's why a team wins late on in the game and your energy is sapped out of you.
Don't be offside. Don't give away penalties. Don't get yellow cards.
If you're losing the physical battle, that's your go-to, isn't it?
That's my advice. What will Jamie Jones-Buchanan be saying for his team talk on Saturday?
Well, I suspect, knowing Jamie and his penchant for talking, his team talk will probably start tomorrow morning, just so he's got it finished for Saturday. I think he'll be stressing pride. I'm not saying that Richard Agar didn't, but this whole spirit of the Rhino and DNA and what it means, you know, there is a guy that not only, you know, printed the T-shirt, but wore it better than anybody else. He fully understands what it entails to play at Headingley in front of a crowd that you know is restless at best, and what the players will need to show to win them back on side. That's what he'll be stressing. I don't think he'll be telling them that they need to change very much. They're good players in their own right. They just clearly are not comfortable in their skin at the moment. Now, whether he can honestly get them to forget about the first 6 weeks of the season and almost start again, that I'm not sure. He didn't wake up on Tuesday morning expecting to be the head coach. He will stand by the principles that he always has done and will paint the picture of know who you're doing it for, do it for each other. You're in this together. It's all about the collective rather than the individual, and that's the thing. That's the way he's always worked. And there was an amazing event at Headingley on Saturday night, which is not necessarily rugby related, but it is. It was the Rob Burrow Strictly Come Dancing event, which wasn't necessarily about rugby league, but without rugby league, it wouldn't have been the event. So there were a lot of people in the room who had come together because of rugby league and the values of rugby league, and standing up for your mate and doing something for your pal and rallying round. And those are the things that Jamie Jones-Buchanan will be stressing. He didn't dance well.
Ryan McDermott, I understand, was very good. But
well, he won. There were 11 celebrity dancers. He went last. By that time, it was close on midnight.
Are we saying recency bias then? Is that what happened?
No, but what he did was he danced to the music of Thriller by Michael Jackson, which just happens to be Rob Burrows' favourite song. It almost encapsulated the whole evening in that one dance. He wore the famous red jacket, and he did a very recognisable representation of that video. So whether he was good, bad, or indifferent, they were all magnificent, all the celebrities. But his performance at the end absolutely epitomised what the whole event was about and why people were there. And whilst this is not in the slightest relevant to what we were talking about, it actually is, because in some ways, if you could capture what was in that room as, if you like, the essence of the club and what they're doing rallying around Rob, that's what they need to show on the field now. And that is something that Jamie Jones-Buchanan perhaps can bring to the party, because Richard Agar is a student of rugby league, not demonstrative in the way that some coaches are. And I think, again, laid a huge amount of responsibility on those players to perform. Jamie might go down a bit more the emotional route,
which isn't something that necessarily will work long term. And obviously, I don't think he's going to be the long term successor. It would be a surprise if he was, and with no experience coaching whatsoever in the professional game. But what's going to happen next? Who's going to be in the biggest job in world rugby? One of them. Well, Eddie Jones. He's going to get binned off by the RFU. Get him in.
Well, he'd be an outside bet with Anthony Seibold. I think the issue for Gary Hetherington is, does he look for a short-term fix until he decides who he really wants in the job? Are they available? What does he have to do to get them? Or does he go for the succession plan, which clearly he would have been thinking about a little bit in the knowledge that Richard Agar might have been moving at some stage, but didn't expect to be having to put it in force so early in the season. If you listen to the bookies, and clearly they never give money away, so the odds that they are currently giving at the moment will be reflective of how somebody's thinking. They've got Danny Ward as the favourite, who again does not have a great deal of experience of coaching a big club at the top level. He did a magnificent job with London in the top flight, but clearly has not coached with a greater level of resource and therefore pressure. If he were to get the job, and he clearly is available, even though he's taken a rugby union post at a second division union club, it's a part-time role to keep his hand in sport. He could leave that tomorrow and it wouldn't be an issue. He would create history by he and his father becoming the first father and son to play for and coach a team. I cannot think of anybody in any sport, and somebody probably will, but that would, I think, be unique. So he's got to be in the frame. If you're looking for the short-term route, Ellery Hanley, he's just put his hand up to say he wants to coach the All-Stars. Would he perhaps be available over a short-term period to get the team on the phone, get his hand in, get Scoey in as his assistant? He might be a choice. Kevin Sinfield's name will be mentioned, but I think a few things would have to change within the how that department is managed for him to feel that he was coming back on his terms rather than why he left in the first place. And but I do think, again, that maybe at some stage he would like to be a head coach, and that is the place he would like to be it. So his name will no doubt be mentioned, I would think. There's a lot of talk about, is it time to give Danny Maguire his head? Because he's doing a great job under Tony Smith. And in that case, would Tony Smith come? Because he's out of contract at Hull KR at the end of this year. And whilst I am absolutely certain Hull KR will want to keep him and Danny, are they technically on the market? For me, the guy who is probably the favourite, I think he's the bloke who they had earmarked to take over from Richard Agar at some point, is Ryan Carr, who was at Featherstone in 2019, took them to the £1 million game where they were underpowered against who they were playing, and not surprisingly didn't win, but won a lot of plaudits for the way they played that year. He also spent a fair amount of time on the Leeds coaching staff as an assistant to Richard Agar, knows the players, knows the systems, knows the young guys coming through. I think he's the guy that they had earmarked at some point to come back over. clearly, I think he's still employed by Parramatta. So you're talking about, does he want the job? Is he prepared to relocate his family? Will he get a visa? How quickly will he get it? That, again, I don't think that's an appointment that you could make quickly. So the next 3 or 4 results are going to be very important as to whether you stick with JJB, Sean Long, whoever else might be helping them out, or, do you go out and get who you want, or do you have a stopgap until you get who you really want? And it's probably too early to look at all of that at the moment. Although I guarantee, for Gary Hetherington saying we've got time, he's working on nothing other than that at this very moment.
Waiting Bennett till the end of the season. He's not doing anything.
Well, you see, funnily enough, he is available, isn't he? I know that the work that he can do in putting together his Dolphins team, he can just as easily do from here. Why wouldn't you consider it? If you wanted somebody who was going to walk in a dressing room and every single player in that dressing room, young, old, international, experienced, on the way up, would have a sharp intake of breath. Yep, Ellery Hanley's one because of the reputation that goes before him. Wayne Bennett's the other. Lake
Austin back on the wing. That'd be exciting.
I'm sure he'd be first to open the door to let him in.
The parallels between Manchester United post-Ferguson and Leeds Rhinos post that Smith, McLennan, McDermott era are frightening. Apart from Leeds are obviously well run as a business, and Manchester United are a show.
Well, and the other thing about that is it's not just Manchester United. You can look back to any team that's had a successful era. When that era ends, 2 things happen. One is a lot of very good players who've been the core of that team will all retire at round about the same time, and they cannot be replaced in the short term. It's almost impossible because one of the ingredients for success is keeping them all together. Therefore, they are going to all retire round about the same time together. The other thing is sport is supposed to be cyclical, and salary cap sport is certainly supposed to be cyclical. So there will be periods in every club's history, your own. It might go back to the 1960s, but they were unbelievably dominant for 8 years. They were almost untouchable. But what happened in the 9th year? And why have they never come back? It's not a Leeds thing. It's a sport thing. The great Wigan team of the 80s and 90s at some point broke up. It might have been economic reasons. They may have bankrupted themselves by buying every good player for 15 years. But the fact is that the structure itself is not strong enough to survive that period you need to transition into the next era. So it's happened to every club. It will continue to happen.
I think one of the most interesting things I read on social media yesterday was Richard Mathers, former guest on this programme, and a player who's also been coached by Richard Agar in the past, who said how much improved under him and enjoyed working under him. I don't think I've ever heard a player say they haven't enjoyed working under Richard Agar. He's never been able to win the fans over completely wherever he's coached for whatever reason, but the players all enjoy working under him. Challenge Cup winner 2 years ago. And I think, as you say, the test is, are Leeds as a team in a better place than they were when he took over? And the answer is obviously yes, slightly. But at least they are improved. And the foundations are there to move forward as well, with the young players coming through and the likes of signing the likes of Cruz leaving and making him captain.
I think you're right in the sense that he never courted publicity wherever he coached. He didn't go out of his way to make himself popular with the fans. He was a player's player, first and foremost, a player's coach, first and foremost. And I think you're right that there will always be some players who don't get chosen by a coach who have a downer on them, but the bulk of the people that have been under him will come out and staunchly defend him. And I think his record is a good one. You look at wherever he went. I think he improved the clubs he was at. He took a vagabond group at Wakefield and turned them into playoff contenders. And those are words that were used by that group itself. It's not disparaging in any way whatsoever. He took people that were not wanted at other clubs and turned them into a team. And I think what he did at Leeds was that role that he took up in 2019 when David Ferner left was not what he planned to come over for. But he looked around and saw that people like JJB, Chev Walker would have been next in line if you were promoting from within, were not experienced enough to take on what was a broken club at that stage. So he stepped into the breach. And as he said yesterday when he left, I was never a reluctant coach. I wanted to do it, and I've loved doing it, and it's been a great club to do it at. But that he stepped up to do it. It was a selfless act. He didn't have to do it. So 2019, the club is stabilised. It really could have got relegated. And the process begins to make the young players who are there and talented better, but also bring in a greater crop. And they're starting to come through now. There is some degree of stability in the playing ranks that they may not have all the right players in the right positions at the moment, but some of the talent that they've got coming through is at the top of its game. Harry Newman for one. Let's use him as an example. Michalewski is another. Clearly, both already in the England squad. I think 2020 was a year that no club will be able to say was comfortable in any manner. But he won the Challenge Cup, and who we beat and how we got there doesn't matter. Somebody has to win the cup. He won the cup. It's a trophy in the sideboard. 2021. Again, injury raddled from week one, 80 minutes from getting to Old Trafford. So I think, he can hold his head up absolutely high in the record that he had. I think he leaves them in a better place than they were as a club, not on the league ladder. And I think he's an honourable man who I think the fans, when they've calmed down and seen, how this plays out, should realise did a very valuable job at a very difficult time. The interesting stat that was sent through by Phil Daly, the Rhinos media manager, there's only one coach who is still in post, currently in Super League, who was there when Richard Agar started 3 years ago. And the amazing thing about that is you talk about turmoil and relate it to Leeds. It's happened at every single club in Super League, bar one. Clearly, St Helens had to change their coach because Justin Holbrook was so successful. He took up the opportunity to play in the NRL, and they have done a marvellous job to get somebody in who's probably even taken them to a different level. But every club has changed their coach in that 3-year period. And the only one who hasn't is Steve McNamara.
I guess that as well. I was going to say that, but you beat me to it, so I can't.
Another one who the bookies would tell you is 7 or 8 to 1 to be the next coach of Leeds. I wouldn't bank on that.
No. Give up the south of France for Leeds. I mean, I know Leeds is lovely and everything. You've got parks. And
well, the sun was out today. It was gorgeous.
Yeah, but that was Leeds. That was Leeds in crisis. So there you go. And that'll be back again next week. When they lose to Catalans.
I think the other thing to say, and it was sort of crystallised in my mind when I read John's piece earlier today, and I would recommend people to read it and obviously make up their own minds which parts of that analysis they think are the most significant. If this was a single issue to solve, it would have been solved. It's a combination of factors because people like Richard Agar, Gary Hetherington, they are the shrewdest of operators, and if it was, you need to have the bathwater at 20 degrees hotter, they do that and solve it. It's nothing like that.
We haven't not given credit to Salford for their performance, but Salford played really well in that game, coming from behind at half-time and all that. So well done, Salford. You played really well. Over 5,000 there, nearly 6,000, so decent attendance. Who knows what's happening with their home? We don't know because the football club's staying at whatever it's called, the Peninsula Stadium, for another season. We don't care about the Sharks. They don't get mentioned here, so we'll see what happens. Gary Neville will tweet something about it, probably. But well done, Salford. You won a game, and
now they were good because they've got a real spirit under Paul Rowley, and having lost 3 games, it would have been very easy to say, your start to the season was. You were just ahead of a couple of other teams, and what our good friend Rod Studd would say is regression to the mean. But they showed that now that there is something about them, and they've got a way of playing that really suits them, and they deserved absolutely 100% their success, as Gemma Carter told us they would do when we arrived at the ground last week.
Obviously for his health more than anything, but I'm glad he's back on Twitter because he makes it a much more interesting place than Rob. I see myself as kind of like not even a pound shot Rod Studd sometimes, but I wish I could be as good as the great man. So Leeds are in crisis. Also kind of in crisis are Warrington, who lost to Wakefield on TV. Usually when Wakefield are on TV, as they were a couple of weeks ago against Leeds, I who'd have thought this now? Leeds blowing Wakefield away in that first half of that game, and then they've lost the coach. But now Wakefield go to Warrington and win in style, and they're knocking down the main stand, and we're getting a new stand. And I can't cope with all the positivity at Wakefield. Now, granted, until I'm sat in it, I won't believe it, but that's no knock on what's going on at the club or the people there. I've heard so many things in the past before. But when I'm there, I'll be very happy. But on the field, 38-22. 18 all at half time. There's an obvious style to Willie Poaching's play. And I think to take a leaf out of Mr. Schofield's book, if you see it, play it. And that's what they do. And they do try things which don't work in areas of the field where they shouldn't do it. But if they didn't do it there, they wouldn't do it at the other end of the field and then score some spectacular tries. And that was a comprehensive victory for Wakefield. And it had me cheering from my armchair. I was very excited by the performance. I only wish I was there, but if I'd have gone, they'd have lost. So at least we won. So
I think the first thing as well. Well, I think the first thing to say about that is that clearly Channel 4 haven't had a match for a month. And those of us that would watch, any game, anywhere, anytime, we're always going to, say, oh, great, it might have been a month, but we can't wait, bring it on. And I do think the Channel 4 coverage is really good because it's relaxed, it's different. And I think it does pull the neutral viewer in. But if you were a neutral viewer and you'd forgotten a little bit about rugby league over the last month and you perhaps didn't have a team that you necessarily supported, but you wanted to stick it on and because you'd quite enjoyed it when you saw it a month ago, that would have reinvigorated you because it was a perfect television game. Wonderful atmosphere, colourful, bright, great pitch that encouraged you to run the ball, and some just spectacular tries. Most of them from Wakefield. Although I did think Danny Walker's was an excellent one just before half time as well. And Matty Ashton's clearly, any long range effort gets the commentators and pundits purring. But it was, I think, Wakefield's belief, and as you say, their belief in each other and the fact that Willie Poaching and Francis Cummins have instilled in them the fact that they can and should play because they've got the talent, but there's some things they're going to need to do if they want to play because it isn't going to work every time they try and do it, then that is starting to pay off big time for them. Clearly, the more of your top line players you have on the field directing around in key positions, the better. So Jacob Miller did look really influential. I just think that their pack were outstanding on Thursday. Thursday, I don't even know what day it is. Saturday, because I think they just got on top of a lightweight Warrington pack and never gave them an inch. That it was clearly the kind of track that you could be expansive on, but if you dominate the middle, that gives you the opportunities to move the ball. And Wakefield did that absolutely magnificently. I thought, again, you can't really tell from watching on the telly, Matty Ashurst was head and shoulders above most people on the field. His work ethic and his skill level as well on the edges are exactly what Wakefield are about. And I know he's been that under other coaches at Wakefield, and other coaches in his career. But I just think that Willie's getting the very best out of him at the moment, and he's massive for Wakefield.
I just think he's been there 7 or 8 years now, because we had him on the show on a Monday on Radio Yorkshire when he signed. I remember us phoning him up to speak to him. So it's been a long stint there now, and he's obviously had injury issues in the past, which haven't shown up this season. I was a bit of concern about Tom Johnson going off injured, but interesting to see how the teams match up on Sunday in the Cup, whether it would be a similar kind of result or whether Warrington would get a kick at the backside.
I think it's about identity. You look at the clubs that are being successful at the moment, even on a week-to-week basis. Salford and Wakefield last week, you could identify what they were about. Leeds and Warrington, you couldn't. And I know that, again, is no slight on Darryl Powell. He's been there 5 minutes, and clearly what he wants to institute is not something that has been second nature to them. He's changed it. So I think there is always going to be a time. The concern, I think, if you were watching Warrington over the last 3 weeks, is that they set some quite high standards themselves, and they're not hitting them. You know, they were relatively fortunate against Leeds in week 1, as we said, and that was acknowledged as much by them. That's not a Leeds fan saying that. You know, clearly against Catalans and St Helens, they were palpably second best. And again, you look for response, don't you? And you thought, oh, you know, home to Wakefield on Channel 4, that response will be evident from minute 1. And they never looked comfortable, I don't think. There was a degree of uncertainty about a lot of what they were doing and who was taking charge. There was a sense of a little bit of anonymity about the halfbacks. And you know, you were saying who's got the better ones. Well, in terms of amount of money paid, marquee, Warrington's halfback should be having more of an influence than they certainly did this weekend, and probably have done over the last couple of weeks.
Now, the exciting thing is, dear listener, which will mean nothing to you, because we're recording this, we started at about 5 o'clock. In about 10 minutes, we'll find out what's happened to Will Pryce. So stay tuned for that. You'll already know, but we'll find out. I don't think there's much more to say about Wakefield and Warrington, other than that was it. I'm excited. I've said it on the programme, and I've only seen them live once this year. That was that friendly against Fev, and I said Corey Hall looked really good, and he looked good again, and that left edge looked good. They're giving it a go. They did it against Catalans the other week in the south of France. They're having a go, you know. And the only time they haven't was probably that first half against Leeds when Leeds blew them away. But it showed how important those 2 wins are now.
But the important thing was that they did give it a go in the second half against Leeds. That, you know, whatever Willie is saying to them, they're responding to it. And if he said, you know, clearly this game's gone, but I need you to show me that you've got something about you in the second half, if nothing else, that's exactly what they did. And I think, again, in that game, we shouldn't forget that they lost Jacob Miller very early on. And that's always going to upset a team when, you know, you've trained all week around your key man and after 5 minutes he goes off. So, no, I think the signs are that Wakefield will be fine this year. When you then add into the fact another team that clearly has had an identity and is starting to get the results to go with their identity, you got to say Toulouse. It's, you know, clearly it's the result of the season, the bottom side beating the top, which reflects really well on the competition as a whole. But that result's been coming for Toulouse for at least 2 or 3 weeks. And what, again, Sylvain Ules has not done is changed his philosophy or belief. He's wanted them to go out and play the same way, but better every week. And they've got better every week. And they should have beaten Wigan the week before. And they now have beaten St Helens. That is astonishing. And, you know, I think when it's far too early to be talking about who are the favourites to be being relegated. But Toulouse, again, have put down a little bit of a marker by saying, don't just assume it's going to be us because we lost 5 of our first 6 games. There is a realisation and belief that they are doing it right there and they're playing to their strengths and they're not going to compromise that. And clearly they need a couple more players and they're on the lookout for them. But they can be, you know, absolutely confident that they're going to turn some teams over this year.
And they get a week off this week because they're not in the Challenge Cup. So they get 2 weeks rest ahead of the big game with Castleford.
Which again is a massive game, even this early in the season. So yes, I think we should pay enormous credit to that result. I don't think it's got anything to do with St Helens not taking 4 of their players. I think that's going to happen to every club during the season. They're going to have periods where they don't have some of their top names available. I don't know whether St Helens didn't take Toulouse seriously enough. I suspect under Christian Wolff they're not allowed to do that. Whether psychologically in your mind you do, I genuinely don't know. But I do think that we shouldn't underestimate how important that result is. And bearing in mind it was the most important and significant result of the week, I have to reiterate what we said last week. Why the hell can't we see these matches?
Because Radio Merseyside were commentating on them and they're not there. So no. there is a feed coming from somewhere.
There are highlights on the Super League show. So clearly there is, it might not be a multi-camera position, but there is the ability to see that game, which I would say is probably no different to an R-League type of presentation. And that should be on YouTube. That game, if Sky don't want to take it. They own the rights to it. That's fine. So brand the game on YouTube up as Sky Sports. Do whatever you need to do to fulfil their part of the obligation to buying a certain number of matches and effectively bankrolling the competition. But put it on YouTube. How many of us would have rushed to put that on when we'd heard that Toulouse were winning by 10 points and eventually, even though they were pegged back, came back and won the match? Fantastic. But we've not seen it other than the tries.
Now, we did see Wigan and Castleford on Thursday, which, of course, a game Castleford would have won were it not for Mare Fanua leading with the head and hitting someone on the Wigan side, which everyone got upset about because, as is their wont to do, he's not been disciplined further. So we assume that the sin binning was deemed sufficient or whatever, but people are still moan about it. Game's gone. Game has gone, Phil, which is why more people were watching games last weekend and stuff. But I don't know. When people...
That's why St Helens and Wigan on Good Friday is sold out already, because nobody's interested in the game at the moment.
In defence of Huddersfield Giants, who get a lot of stick for their crowds at the John Smiths, and it doesn't look great. Wigan doesn't look great either, with lots and lots and lots of empty seats, as they were on Thursday night against Castleford. Clubs really need to do things for TV games to make it look better. I know some clubs are trying, but Wigan win. I mean, they should be getting them in because they're winning. They're just behind Saints in the table. Good performance from Wigan. There's nothing stood out about the game to talk about other than everyone getting upset about a referee's decision. But apart from that, it was just a game.
No, I think Castleford will feel aggrieved. Naturally, they conceded 12 points when they were down to 12 men and lost by 10. So, there was clearly a material effect of a player in the sin bin at a crucial time in the game. I still think that that isn't the reason teams win or lose. It's how actually you cope with that, and they didn't cope with it very well during that period. They looked extremely vulnerable. Jai Field is still thrilling audiences. Can't take your eyes off him. I think Lee Radford was saying he was really pleased with the togetherness of his squad and the effort that they put in. So, if he can see that that's an improvement, then, both clubs get something out of the game. But I don't think Wigan yet are probably at the level that Matty Pete would want them at. And they looked after the first couple of weeks that they were genuine contenders, and I'm not sure they've been able to sustain that. So bit of work to do for them. It'd be an interesting game against Salford on Friday in the Cup, because Salford will go there infused with confidence. And again, as Paul Rowley was saying, you give us all the plaudits you like for winning one game, but we're not about winning one game. It's being able to do it, the following week as well. Well, we'll see if they can, but that will be a good game, which of course is on Premier Sports. So will not have the same mass audience that it would if it was on other platforms, shall we say? No,
I mean, I'm going to go to the Big Well Stadium on Sunday to watch Wakefield and Fev in the Women's Challenge Cup. So if Wakefield lose, I won't see it anyway because I don't have Premier, so it doesn't count, which is the good news. I know this whole games going soft things are nonsense, but people outside of our bubble don't know what's going on. They genuinely don't know what's going on with any of these yellow cards or anything. No one's perspective of rugby league outside of what we think ourselves is being changed by what is going on. Mainly because they think it's still Eddie Waring and pies and stuff.
I also think what's interesting is that this isn't a media-driven thing. I mean, there are people within the media that are quite vociferous about the yellow cards and the lengths of bans, but normally a campaign is whipped up by the media and then taken on. This is mainly a campaign that's coming from current and ex-players.
Who probably don't know the rules.
If only we had a players' representative who could come on and talk to us about it.
Stay tuned, listener, viewer. We'll get to Huddersfield in a bit, obviously, because we need to talk about the ban. But it'll take us long to talk about Catalans versus Hull KR, because that was played on Friday at the same time as we were all watching Leeds in Crisis live. And Catalans won. Won the second half 8-0. That was it. They won. So I've not seen the highlights, so I don't know what to say.
2 tries each. The difference was Sam Tompkins taking lots of kicks, not only at the car that came on and bought the tee, but the ball over the posts as well.
Oh, that was great, wasn't it, when it ran him over? That was hilarious. Oh, that was terrible.
Do that, Wizzy Rascal, I dare you. I don't think it was a complete performance by the Dragons. Steve McNamara in his press conference was a little bit upset that they hadn't managed to dominate the game, but full credit to Hull KR. That's a real, again, a good performance. I'm told in very difficult conditions. Ryan Hall was at the Rob Burrow Strictly event on Saturday night, and he'd only just dried out, so it must have been really, really heavy rain over there.
Now, it was a good weekend for Leon Pryce, I thought, on Channel 4. I thought he was very good and perceptive in his analysis alongside Mark Wilson. Never heard of him. But not a good weekend for his son, who has received 10 games by the Independent Disciplinary Tribunal. It says here on the RFL's website. Pryce was sent off for a dangerous throw during his side's Betfred Super League match with Hull FC last week and referred to tribunal by the match review panel on a grade F charge. Pryce had previously been found guilty of a dangerous throw during an academy game against Bradford Bulls in May 2021. He's also fined £500. So for those who are saying, well, it's his first time doing this, unfortunately, they keep records of this stuff and it wasn't. And it is a shocker. I don't want to say wins lucky or not, because it's every tackle, as we know, every action on the field, there's a great degree of luck as to whether someone is hurt or walks away or sadly doesn't. But it's a shocking tackle, and the RFL there has said, you can't, well, not the RFL, the independent panel, have said, no, you can't do that. And that is a strong message and a good message, I think, to send out to people. You can't just throw people dangerously to the floor. It did look like something off the wrestling. It really did.
What I also think is significant is that I would be very surprised if Huddersfield appeal, because Ian Watson basically said, it's a lesson he needs to learn. It'll really hurt at the moment that the realisation of what he's done and the consequences of it, which at the time we didn't know what they were. I think Huddersfield will say to him, we'll stand by you, there's no question about that, but we're not going to appeal. It's a long sentence. In a 27-round season, to lose a guy for 10 is massive, but I just think it does send out the right message. And I think Huddersfield, and particularly in Watson, deserve a lot of credit for coming out at the time and not saying, I didn't quite see it, or he basically said, he did it. It'll be a learning experience. If they do appeal it, then that will undermine the strength of Ian Watson's conviction at the time, and would be a shame. So I hope they don't, but I don't think they will. And Will Pryce will come back, hopefully a better player, because every minute of those 10 weeks out will hurt him. People were talking about him being a potential England player in the World Cup. You lose 10 weeks of your season, it's almost impossible to get in that squad. He's made a mistake. He's paying a very heavy price for it, but the right price, or the Will Price, whichever you prefer.
Good win for Hull, though. 14-6, late try for Huddersfield.
Dogged win, defensively very, very strong, and again, I think that there has been some criticism of the style in which Hull have played, and not entertaining enough. I think their fans are absolutely delighted that they've got their season back on track with just playing for, defending for each other, looking after each other. It doesn't have to be hugely flamboyant. Again, Jake Connor was on the back of what was going on in front of him. But Hull fans, I think, like to see effort, and Brett Hodgson's side are delivering on that at the moment.
Before we get on to the Championship, Women's Challenge Cup, York 46, Wigan 0. Saw bits of this, as expected, really. Not much more to say about that. Very good individual try from Liv Whitehead, former Wakefield player we spoke to, was it last year? Everything's all merged together, but Wigan won't be the only team who are beaten heavily by York, because they've got a very strong squad there. You can see that by the 17 they named at the weekend. And good luck to the Bradford Bulls on Sunday when they face York, because it might be a similar scoreline. In fact, I'd probably bet it would be. Our league is showing Saints versus the Army, which is interesting because they're showing that an hour before they show Oldham and Keighley in League One. So again, we're competing with each other and Premier and the BBC. Again, I wouldn't have chosen Saints versus the Army, but I don't choose these things. Warrington versus Barrow. We'd say, based on Barrow's result against the Army, they should win that one comfortably. Hull versus Leeds. I'd wave the white flag now if I was Hull. Huddersfield versus Lee Miners Rangers. In Group 3, as well as Bradford York, it's Wigan versus Dewsbury Moor. And it's a 1 o'clock kickoff at the Bewell Stadium, not 2 o'clock now, for Wakefield versus Fev, and Alton versus Castleford. That Wakefield Fev game will be good, and I think it'd be a good test for Wakefield because obviously they had that big morale boosting win over Cass, but Fev are a completely different animal, very experienced team, and it'll show them where they're going to be for the season. I think they'll learn a lot on Sunday. I think Fev will probably win, which is a shame for me and a shame for the team, but got to be realistic about these things. As long as we play well, that's all that matters. Improvement week on week. So yeah, that Saints versus the Army on at the same time as Oldham versus Keighley. Well, again, that's just bad planning.
I agree. We said the same about Catalan playing at the same time as Leeds and Salford were on Sky. One thing, as we've said, ad nauseam, if you like, is that if Sky have picked a game and a time, that should be sacrosanct. Nobody else should play at that time.
So in the Championship last week, draws everywhere. Barrow 18, London 18, so an important result for London as they move off the bottom of the table. Barrow remain undefeated, and everyone gets excited about T. Ritson because he does some ridiculous things in the Championship. Fev dropped points at Batley, 20 points apiece. So obviously Batley getting revenge for that result in the Cup last week. And that's a big turnaround on the scoreline in the Cup as well. So as we know with Batley and with Craig Lingard's men, they aren't going to give up a fight, are they? And they are where they are in the table because they're a scrappy team who are good. I don't mean scrappy as in scrappy. You know what I mean?
No, I think it's been a fantastic week for Rugby League overall. When you think that in Super League, Toulouse beat St Helens, when you look at the Championship and, Featherstone have dropped their first points of the season, Barrow have dropped theirs too. Batley, who are proving very much that last season wasn't a flash in the pan, making the top 4, and a London team who had no form on the board whatsoever to go up to Cumbria and rescue a point from that. Fantastic. Really, really good. Dewsbury 22, Newcastle 24. You're looking at games where there genuinely is an uncertainty of outcome, which is something we were absolutely desperate for when we invented the phrase. I think the only slightly surprising result, perhaps, was the manner in which Widner's got beaten at York. So again, Widner's early season form was excellent, but that I don't know whether that bubble's burst yet. They're still 4th with 8 points, but they would expect to be closer to York, I would have thought, if they were going to be genuine contenders this year. And Bradford not convincing at bottom of the table Workington yet. So again, difficult place to go, and you're going to always take the 2 points on offer up in Cumbria. But I think I thought maybe Bradford would win that with a greater margin. And Sheffield seem to be hitting a little vein of form as well, scoring a lot. But is that three or 4 weeks in a row that they've got 3 weeks in a row? I think they've got 40 points. So, signs there that Mark Aston's working his magic again.
And they're at Mark Aston's old home of Featherstone on Saturday to host Hull in the Cup because their ground is still not finished because the Olympic legacy. Where's Lord Cohen? He's too busy buying Chelsea. Obviously Lee beat Halifax on the telly yesterday. Forgot that. Also in Challenge Cup action this week, we mentioned Wigan versus Salford on Friday. Saturday, it's Catalans versus Fev, which there must be a feed for because they're showing at Fev Lions. You can go down and watch it. They've arranged it with the BBC. They've not got a hooky feed or anything. It's official. It's allowed.
I think that'll be closer than a lot of people think as well. I think, Featherstone will use it as an opportunity to get, a bit of an away day spirit going, and we've nothing to lose, so we might as well go out and have a bit of fun. And again, we shouldn't forget that clearly there's implications for the 1895 Cup as well from here on in. So they'll be wanting at the very least to get back to Wembley for that event. If not, get a little bit further in the Challenge Cup. I think the Dragons probably will win, but I'm not sure that's going to be a runaway victory.
You've fallen foul of what I did earlier this week. I did a preview of the Challenge Cup and kept saying Wembley, but we're at Spurs.
Well, yes, but they've been to Wembley, so don't want to go back to London.
On that tour where you stand on the roof at Spurs. Hull KR versus Leeds. I mean, that should be a close game on paper.
Isn't that sort of like the fifth year running that they've played each other in the Challenge Cup? So they've got to know each other a little bit.
Leeds versus Cass. That's on the telly on Saturday. Well, that's good. That starts just before I finish my exciting program on North Derbyshire Radio, so I'll be able to watch most of that. That's good. Sheffield versus Hull, as mentioned. Whitehaven versus...
Is Leeds Cass the Tom Maguire derby?
I don't know. He's all Cass now. He's all Cass.
All Cass and he.
Yeah. That is a fascinating game, isn't it? Leeds and Castleford, because
it is. There's a huge narrative behind it, and people talk about, is there still the magic of the cup? Well, there is this week with that game for sure.
I don't know where to go.
Nervy. I can see it being very nervy.
I've already done the predictions for this week, and I can't remember where I went on that. Anyway,
no Zane Tetilano for Leeds.
Oh, he's been banned, hasn't he?
Another forward down, and no Brad Martin for Cass, because he's accepted his 2 games as well for what was a nasty. Well, it wasn't a nasty high tackle; it was a nasty-looking high tackle.
No, but the proper journalists are putting 10 in like letters, TEN, capital letters for the ban, like he scored 8 goals in a football match.
Is it like the teleprinter? Oh.
Yeah. I mean, now Channel 4 News is coming from Leeds.
10 brackets TEN.
Channel 4 News is coming from Leeds today, so it might be the main news story. Breaking news, we've just heard Will Pryce has been banned.
Probably the Richard Agar story will be number 1, I would have thought, if they're coming from Leeds.
And then, because we know on local news from Leeds-based TV stations, a cat in Halifax who can speak Chinese. Whitehaven versus St Helens, 2:00 on the Sportsman, so we can all watch that. I mean, that should be on paper a comfortable win for St Helens, but the great thing about it is Whitehaven have got nothing to lose, and they'll make a few quid out of it, which is the main thing.
Kyle Amor derby.
Oh, yeah. Also on Saturday, League One, London Scholars versus Hunslet at 3:00. League One has kind of snuck in this week. It's starting. What if they'd have got into the... Anyway. Sunday, Challenge Cup, men's, Barrow Huddersfield, and Warrington versus Wakefield. I mean,
Barrow Huddersfield has that element of romance about it. I don't think Barrow will win, but they're unbeaten in the Championship this year. They like you were saying against Whitehaven, deserve a big crowd. They deserve the spotlight. They've been a wonderful club during the pandemic for finding ways to engage with their community. I think they deserve all the plaudits that they're going to get and all the revenue. Hopefully they'll get out of it, and maybe they'll run Warrington close.
Huddersfield.
Huddersfield, but it'd be a good day for them, irrespective.
Bad news for Ian Watson. Not just has Will Pryce been banned, but I've tipped Huddersfield to win the cup. So because I can't tip Wakefield, because we'll probably lose by 50 now at Warrington after last week, but we've got to win.
Well, Warrington need a response. Wakefield need to do something different.
Warrington in crisis, it'll say on those next week.
Well, if they lose, I think they wouldn't be in crisis, but they'd certainly be questions in the House by the Speaker.
He'll let them off. He always does. Workington play Halifax in the Championship, and League One, Doncaster versus Midlands. They're there. Oldham Keighley on our league. Rochdale versus North Wales, and Swinton versus West Wales. So Rugby League is proper. Everything's back now.
Except Cornwall, who sit out this week and make their debut next week.
Let me find the wheelchair results off the top of my head.
There was only one. London Roosters beat Warrington.
Up the Roosters. So I think that's it, isn't it? I don't think anything else happened. No one else has been banned, or there's no other news. No other coaches have been sat while we've been on. So that's good. Excitement. Brilliant. Rugby League is back. Is the legend with us on Monday? Do we know if he's busy these days? He's everywhere, isn't he?
He asks us to let him know what plans we have for him, and then he says yes, and then comes back and says, "Oh, I can't do it." So we'll ask if he's free. I suspect he probably doesn't have much opinions on anything at the moment. So he'd be quiet if you got him on. What would he say? Rubbish. Bloody rubbish.
The aim is we will be live on Monday at the usual time. And
usual time in this place.
Yes,
I'm all on my own. It's getting dark. There's no biscuits.
I mean, look at. I need to take these shirts down.
Nobody to bring me cups of coffee in the style of Brian Barwick.
Is that happening? Is that part of the realignment? Is we've lost the use of a person to bring us cups of tea? Because apparently that's happening now. But no one.
No, apparently not everybody could be bothered to turn up to the meeting or send a proxy vote, but those who did all voted in favour and well. But I think they should tell us who didn't turn up, don't you?
Yeah, it's always good fun, isn't it?
Find out. We'll get Mr. Davidson on the case. He's the news ferret.
Investigative journalism. That's certainly not what this programme is about. So thank you very much for watching. We'll be back on Monday because we have to be with all the fallout.
We might even be back before.
Yes, we might be. Has that person replied? No, they haven't yet. So we'll if they do, then we'll be back later this week. If they don't, we'll be back on Monday. That is a promise. What's on Premier on Monday? I don't know. Let's see in the paper.
I don't think they've got anything because they've got two cup ties.
They've got cup ties, haven't they?
Friday and Sunday. So I don't think there isn't a Monday game this week.
Excellent. Well, Mark and Kevin Brown and Leon and Emma and Ross, they can all have pies at home and watch our programme instead because we'll be back on Monday because there's no excuses now. Thanks for watching. Download the podcast. You've already done that probably, or watch the programme. Do all those things, and we'll see you next week when Leeds might still be in crisis, but Castleford might be as well, or Warrington or somebody else, because there's always a crisis somewhere around the corner.